Hey guys, Poro here with another video. This time I will be tier listing and ranking the teams heading into Worlds 2025, and I will also be showing my pick'ems. Oh my gosh. You might hear my voice. I'm actually not going to edit that out. If you're going to hear my voice crack a few times during this recording, I think, because I literally just woke up 20 minutes ago. So, we're recording this. I might be like a little bit drowsy or something, who knows. But anyways, originally what I was going to do was that I was going to do my teams tier list after all of my player rankings. I just posted all my player rankings. I just posted the support video also 20 minutes ago when I woke up. So this one we're going to be recording now. It's going to get uploaded at 6 in the morning. So originally I was going to do my team rankings here, but I mean, if you guys have been following the channel, you would know that I've done an individual team breakdown for every single team. I have now ranked every single player over the course of over 4 hours. I think it was either over 4 hours or close to 4 hours. But I basically what I'm saying is that I have been talking about these teams for upwards of 6, 7, 8 hours now. So I feel like there is only so much that I can say about the teams that I haven't already said multiple times. So I expect this team tier list to go by a little bit faster. So to make the video a little bit longer, to beef it up a little bit, I'm also going to share my LolEsports Pick'ems because a lot of people in the comments have been asking me for those. So I will show those, including my crystal balls, and I'll talk about like what I was thinking for those and kind of what my mindset is for Pick'ems as a whole. You might notice looking at this tier list that I have done away with the SABCDF whatever formula, and instead I have replaced it with different labels. These labels are what I think the team is expecting heading in. So for example, if I put a team in must make finals, it means that if that team does not make finals, that team should view their year as a disappointment overall. Like the players and the coaching staff and the managers should be upset with how they performed. I guess like upset is the wrong word. I don't want to like undermine accomplishments or anything, but I guess like the word that I'm looking for is that I feel like there are, for example, there are more than 8 teams at this tournament who I believe their staff and their management have the expectation that they make quarterfinals. And if they don't make quarterfinals, they'll feel like they must have done something wrong or they'll leave the tournament with regrets. Whereas on the flip side, if a team like, I don't know, 100 Thieves randomly makes semifinals, they're not, but if 100 Thieves randomly makes semifinals, I don't think a single person on that team is going to walk away from that tournament upset. I think everybody's going to walk away from that tournament being like, oh my gosh, we did it. It's like, so that's kind of how I'm going into it. So what this means is that there will be more than 2 teams in these tiers. There will be more than 4 teams in these tiers. There will be more than 8 teams in these tiers. And then down here I have happy if wins 2 games, happy if wins 1 game. So that's kind of how I'm doing it. I want to kind of like set what I believe the expectation for each team should be. And then also I want to note that this type of format is not very accommodating to IG. So when I do my T1 ranking, I'm going to assume that T1 beat IG, and then when I do my IG ranking, I'm going to assume that IG somehow beat T1. So that's how that's going to work. So you guys are going to see IG higher up on the tier list. That does not mean that I think IG is going to beat T1. I'm just going to like plug the scenario in my head in which IG does beat T1 and gets to play in Swiss. I've been seeing a lot of other tier lists. They all have IG in dead last because they all believe that IG is going to go out in 17th. But I feel like that's a little bit silly because, IG is not the 17th strongest team at this tournament. So I think that for a hypothetical format like this, I can give them the hypothetical first series win. So let's get right into it. Starting off with Gen G, I think that Gen G must win. They've been the best or second best team in the world all year. First split, they were the second best team. Second split onwards, they were the best team. In regular season, I believe they were 29-1 in rounds 3 through 5 combined. They obviously won MSI. They have a star-studded roster, a championship caliber roster. You have Canyon, Chovy, Ruler, Keen. Like these players are players who go into every single year with the hope and the expectation that they should win the world championship. I think if Gen G don't win the championship, they will be disappointed with themselves. There's also some other stuff going into this. Like we know that Chovy has been given the label of having a world's curse. So this is the type of tournament where it's like, okay, Chovy, if you can't win with this roster, when are you going to win worlds? Like that's the type of questions that people will be asking for this team. The reason why I think that Gen G is so good is because they are the best mid and late game team in the tournament. and they are the best team when it comes to late Fearless. So we're talking like games 4 and 5 of Fearless. If you get to a game 4 or a game 5, this team just has an absolute champion ocean that they will pull out on you to make you suffer. Like Canyon can play a number of unorthodox champions. Like if you get into a game 4 or 5 and you give Canyon a great angle to pick a Lee Sin or a Nidalee or even like a Karthus, you know, if you give him a moment to pick something like that, like he can absolutely rip you to shreds there. If you give Chovy a window to go Twisted Fate or Zoe or a pick like that, we even saw there was a game 5 last pick Vex that he went and he ended up going 10-0 on that. So like he's somebody who has a massive champion pool, so he can punish you there. You know, Ruler's somebody who can play everything. Keen can play everything. Duro's even got some late fearless picks that he can pull out to absolutely ruin your day, like the Blitzcrank. So I think you do not want to get into a late series against this team. If you want to beat Gen G, you have to beat them early on in the series, or at the very least, you have to get some kind of 2-1 lead over them in the first 3 games to have any chance. Because, I mean, like, obviously KT beat them in games 4 and 5, but that was kind of an anomaly. And then Gen G swiftly 3 of them later. So Gen G's biggest weakness is that they're a little bit AFK early. There are a lot of games where they try to play early game too rigid and they end up falling behind a few thousand gold, and then they have to outmaneuver their opponents and beat their opponents on objective setups and rotations to get their way back into the game. I do think that is an avenue in which we can see teams win. We saw T1 play a best of 5 against Gen G in Summer Split playoffs, and T1 looked like the better team in games 1 through 3 because Owner was running around making plays everywhere. Canyon was not keeping up. You know, like Chovy was maybe dying to some ganks he shouldn't have been dying to. But either way, Gen G as a team were not being proactive early. T1 was. So T1 ended up with leads in those games, and that is why they had the lead heading into game 4. And then we ran into some T1 draft problems, which I'll talk about later. But for the most part, if you're going to beat Gen G, you have to beat them early. If you don't beat them early, they will outside lane you. They will I mean, at a certain point, like you'll even lose individually with 1v1 lanes. If your jungle and your support are not proactively trying to do stuff to get the lanes ahead, your lanes will lose out individually 1v1. You're going to get out rotated. They will have better objective setups than you. They will have better team fighting than you. Gen G love to set up objectives in such a way that it is borderline impossible for the enemy team to walk in. Part of the reason why so many people think that Gen G are this slow, methodical team that is reminiscent of past LCK teams from the mid 2010s is because when teams go up against Gen G, they don't fight. And the reason why they don't fight isn't because Gen G is passive in mid and late game. Gen G is not a passive mid and late game team. The reason why no teams will fight against them is because Gen G's objective setups are so oppressive that teams feel like they cannot fight, and so they choose not to fight. They choose to sack the objective because if they were going to go in and fight, they know that they would just get wiped and lose. So in that regard, Gen G is a very aggressive team. I mean, like if they end up going against a team like AL, obviously AL is not going to back down from that situation, and those games are going to be very bloody. I think that Gen G play a style that is, in theory, very bloody if the enemy team is willing to kind of try to match them. But the thing is that no team can match them because Gen G just have the best objective setups and the best rotations, and everybody knows it. So I think that Gen G should come into this tournament as the favorites. They should come in with the expectation to win. If they make it to grand finals and lose, I think these players will feel disappointed. Next up, must make finals. So the first team I want to put into must make finals tier is T1. I think that even though T1 is the 4th seed coming out of the LCK, I do believe that they have been the second best team in the world all year, essentially. I know that they got 3-0'd by HLE in playoffs, but I think that there were some things happening there. You know, T1, they came out with a draft that was very uncharacteristic for them. I think the idea was that they were planning on going late into Fearless, and they just wanted to try and get some HLA champions off the board, and then obviously HLA ended up winning that game, and they took the momentum to go 3-0. But T1 over the course of that playoffs were having struggles where teams were starting to draft more around making sure that Keria couldn't get his champions, and if Keria can't get his champions, then T1 gets pushed later into Fearless, and then you start to run into some champion pool issues for their other players. Like the meta wasn't the greatest for Faker and Guma, for example. So those are some issues we saw T1 run into in LCK playoffs. I think now with prep time, now that T1 has seen this strategy be used against them by multiple teams in playoffs, I think that they'll be able to go to the drawing board and kind of plan around it, and I don't think that they will run into that issue again. we also have to account for the T1 international buff. I hate using international buff. I think that is like the dumbest narrative ever, but it is a thing. T1 always come into Worlds as a team who is not expected to win or even make semis, and then they just end up elevating their play and becoming crazy anyway. So I guess like we can consider that a factor. But for the most part, I mean, like in Split 2, they were the second best team for sure. They made it to grand finals of MSI. They came into Split 3 and absolutely dominated HLE for the entirety of regular season. Like people, recency bias, they might only think about HLE 3-0ing T1 in playoffs, but you can't forget about the fact that HLE were 0-6 against Gen.G and T1 in that regular season in Split 3. So, I mean, like, it was not looking good for them. Like, T1 was definitely the second best team. So I think that the one best of 5 that HLE 3-0'd T1 in is too small of a sample size for me to think that T1 are still not capable of winning the entire tournament. I do think that T1 should feel like they need to make finals. And then if they don't make finals, if they don't have a repeat of their MSI success, if they don't live up to being the second best team in the world, then they'll probably be disappointed. I think that something about T1 is that I think that they are one of the strongest early fearless teams. I think that the way in which T1 plays out their early games, the way that the owner is moving around the map, the way that carry is moving around the map, it feels like they can win early games against just about anyone. I love watching them play early. So I think that, you know, if you're playing a series against T1, they're kind of like the inverse Gen.G. They come out of the gate swinging, and then the later into the series you get them, the more pinched their champion pools get, the more inflexible their drafts get, and the higher chance you have of succeeding. But I mean, you've got to get through the storm of games 1, 2, and 3 first, and that is no easy feat. So I think that T1 should make finals. Another team that I think must make finals is HLE. So HLE, while I do think that they are the third best team coming out of the LCK realistically, I think that when you look at the roster and when you look at the year that they've had, you feel like they need to perform really well. They signed Zeus, who at the start of the year people were expecting him to be the best top laner in the world. I think that over the course of the year, it's been Keen who's been the best top laner in the world, but the point is that expectations were that Zeus could be the best top laner in the world. I think that expectations were that Zeka could be the best mid laner in the world. So like we're seeing there's a lot of players on this team who could be the best in the world. Like Viper can be the best in the world. Delight can be the best in the world. And these players have not been the best in the world, but they all can be, and they all came into the year thinking that maybe they should be. So we saw HLE do really well in Split 1, and then they won Split 1 playoffs and went to first stand and won that. So they came out of the year, everybody was thinking that maybe HLE could be the strongest team. Then they just kind of had a little bit of a collapse. It turned out that they couldn't get their pieces to all be consistent at the same time. In Split 2, they dropped to being the second best team. Then they lost to T1 in playoffs. Then in Split 3, they were the third best team. So they've been on a bit of a downwards trajectory. And lately, they've been on the rise again. Like just recently in Split 3 playoffs, Peanut stepped it up a lot. And so the team has been able to be a lot more functional because Peanut was one of those pieces who were very inconsistent before. And if he's going to be more consistent, if he's going to play at Worlds the way that he played in LCK playoffs, I think this team has a much higher likelihood of being a scary team all the time. So, you know, I feel like for a roster like this with these kinds of names, you are expecting to make finals. So I think that we have these teams all feel like they need to make finals. So somebody's going to end up disappointed. This next one is going to be a massive hot take. I think that a lot of people are going to be shocked that I'm going to say this, but I have another team who I think must make finals, and it's not BLG, and that team is Top Esports. So, okay, here is the deal with Top Esports, all right? Most likely what's going to happen is that Top Esports are going to come in, and they're going to shit the bed, and they're going to choke it up, and they're going to get knocked out in like quarterfinals or something. Like this is what happens every single time Top Esports go to an international. But again, the same way with T1 that I don't like to give them a free international buff just because it's an international. If I'm looking at the series if I'm looking at the season realistically, if I delete everything that happened from 2024 backwards and I only look at what happened in 2025, and even if I delete First Stand, because I don't know, let's say that I'm somebody who just thinks that First Stand is a Mickey Mouse tournament and I'm only looking at Split 3 and Split 3 playoffs. I think that if I'm only looking at Split 3 and Split 3 playoffs and I just forget who Top Esports is as an org and I turn all of the nameplates off, I think Top Esports has been an incredibly dominant team. I think that they have been the highest ceiling team in the LPL by a significant margin. In their series against BLG, I always felt like Top Esports came in looking like the better team, and then they would throw their leads against BLG. But, I mean, in regular season, Top Esports was the best team. Coming into playoffs, they were the 1 seed. Against every single team that they played against, they clearly outclassed them. So they dominated IG, they dominated AL. In upper bracket finals, realistically, they dominated BLG as well, and then just did the Top Esports thing where they would throw games. So I really feel like Top Esports were coming into those LPL playoffs with the expectation to win, and they just couldn't get it across the finish line because they're chokers. And then coming into Worlds, like my impression of this team is that they are a world-class caliber team. 369 is a world-class top laner. Kanavi is a world-class jungler. Jackie Love, as much as he's an inter, Jackie Love is a world-class bot laner. Hong is a support who has made it to knockout stage like 3 times in recent years, right? Cream, I know that people have a low impression of Cream, but realistically, Cream's trajectory is that he is a young, mechanically talented player who recently got promoted to a top team, so he should be somebody who is on the rise as well. I feel like when you look at this roster, this is a roster that is capable of winning Worlds, and then so the expectation should be that they are capable of winning Worlds. And when they inevitably underperform and get knocked out in quarterfinals because they match up against T1 and get 3-0'd or something in the most underwhelming way possible, we should be disappointed with them. We should look at Top Esports' performance, and we should be disappointed and upset and angry that they did not perform well yet again. But I think that when you watch Top Esports play their games, I think that Top Esports are the best in the world at multiple things. They're the best early game team in the world, even better than T1. I think the Top Esports have phenomenal early games. The way that they plan out their early objectives and the way that they set up their lanes early, the ganks they go for, the dives they go for, the lane swaps they go for, are all fantastic. For the first 15 minutes of the game, Top Esports are a fantastic, fantastic team. They should go into a series against any team and be expected to have a lead coming into Rift Herald. They should be expected to have a lead after Rift Herald. And when you have a team that has players like this and the expectation to always have leads against everyone, I think they are a team that must make finals or their year is a disappointment. Like I truly think so. I think like if Top Esports make it to semifinals and they lose in semifinals, I'm still going to come out of the year like shaking my head. I'm gonna say Top Esports underperformed for their 6th international in a row. That's what I would say if they made semis. I would say they underperformed for yet another international. That's just how I feel. So I think that in terms of ceiling, Top Esports is the only LPL team that can really punch above their weight and maybe take a dig at Gen G, but most likely it will just not happen because, Jackie Love has been super inconsistent. He's been running it down a bunch. Like 369 had bad stretches, especially towards the beginning of the year. Kanavi has had wavering levels of consistency. I know a lot of people are super high on Kanavi, and I also had Kanavi as the 3rd best jungler coming into this tournament, but I do think Kanavi has been a little bit inconsistent here and there. Hong is somebody who can be super on fire, but he can also have down stretches too. I think that Cream has had a couple of lackluster internationals. But again, every single time that I think about these players underperforming, it's always at an international, and they're always underperforming expectations because I always expect them to do way better. And once again, I expect them to do way better, and they probably won't, but that doesn't mean that that's not what I'm expecting of them. That doesn't mean that that is not the bar that I have set for them. So the bar I have set for Top Esports is that based on the way that I've seen them play out their early games, and based on the way that I've seen this team's coordination severely outclass every other team in the LPL, my expectation is that they need to get their shit together and make finals, and if they don't, I will be disappointed. So that's kind of my piece on Top Esports. And again, if I was going to bet money on it, I would bet that Top Esports is not making finals. But that does not mean that when they don't, I won't be disappointed in them. Next up, must make semis, BLG. So people are going to see that I have BLG under Top Esports. They're going to think it's weird. BLG, they beat Top Esports in 2 best-of-5s. So, like, what more can you do than beating Top Esports in 2 best-of-5s? But again, I think that those series, Top Esports came in as the favorites. They went into those games looking like the better team. They were outclassing BLG for solid portions of the games. Like, in the games that Top Esports won, it felt like Top Esports were stomping BLG. in the games that BLG won, it felt like Top Esports had the lead and they had command of the game and then they just threw. So like when that's what a series looks like, I'm going to label Top Esports as chokers and I'm going to look at BLG and I'm going to be like, okay, this team doesn't have the ceiling to take down a Top Esports if Top Esports were playing in good form. So, BLG, their season has been a bit wonky. They've had a lot of jungle issues. So something for BLG coming in is that Shadow has recently had a slew of good performances in late Fearless. So a lot of people are super high on Shadow, but I personally don't think that Shadow is as good as people think he is. Like, it's really great that he stepped it up in the big moment when it mattered, but I don't feel confident that Shadow is a jungler who is a world-class talent who can carry a team to a finals. That he's just not really that type of player for me. Like, there's a reason why BLG kept on trying to start Beichuan, and then when Beichuan would underperform, they would sub Shadow in. It's because BLG clearly does not think that either jungler is that much better than the other jungler that they deserve to be a full-time jungler. They deserve the starting spot. Like, even in grand finals, Shadow did not receive the starting spot if I recall correctly. So I think the team, they're still behind the scenes. They're still trying to figure out what jungler they want to use. They will probably use Shadow just because of how well Shadow elevated towards the back half of playoffs. But I would be shocked if Shadow could perform at that level for the entirety of Worlds. Bin is also another player who I think has had a lot of down stretches. There are a lot of people coming into this tournament who highly rate Bin. They think that he had a really good playoffs, and they're remembering how he's looked in past years, and so they think that he's really scary. But Bin has not been a very capable top laner this split. In split 3 regular season, he was maybe the 4th best top laner in the league, and that is in a league where I thought that all of the top laners were either underwhelming-ish or not performing the way that they should be. I think that 369 was not quite performing the way that I would have wanted him to. The Shy is somebody who, even when he's playing at his best, he's still in Big 2025, he's still going to be a player who makes a lot of mistakes, who dies a lot. And Flandre is a player who, while he is elite in many ways, he is not a player that screams dominant top tier top laner just because of how his playstyle is. So if Bin can only be the 4th best top laner in a regular season against a field like that, it feels weird to me. It feels off to me. I thought that a lot of times Bin was pretty invisible for BLG's games. They have been putting Bin on a lot more weak side champions, a lot more tanks. And while Bin is fine at those, while he's good at those, it's not his elite skill set. Like, Bin's elite skill set is when he has the resources. It's when he's able to carry on side lane threats like a Camille or a Jax or something like that. And Jax is getting buffed coming into this Worlds, so that is a Bin buff. But it remains to be seen if BLG are going to be willing to actually shift their entire style and play for that, because the way that BLG has been playing is that they've been giving less resources to Bin and putting more resources into Knight and Elk. So, if the team decides to make a shift and give Bin Jax and start playing for Bin, then, maybe Bin can look really good. But then I have to question, like, okay, well, then now how are the other roles going to look? Because we haven't seen these other players function on lower resources like this. This is not a strategy that they have gone towards this year. So, for me, I think that the LPL is coming into this tournament as definitely not the favorites. Like, we saw at MSI, BLG looked completely outclassed by AL, and AL could hang around with T1 and Genji, but when push came to shove, they couldn't actually beat either of them. So that's kind of what we're working with here, is that we're working with the LPL just being kind of a step below the LCK this year. So it's like, I have Top Esports kind of right there, maybe hanging with the LCK, because I thought that Top Esports, their ceiling actually looked really good. BLG's ceiling, I'm not so convinced. I thought that BLG's ceiling was enough to beat Top Esports when Top Esports started underperforming, but I don't have much expectations past semis. I don't see which of these 3 LCK teams they could actually beat to make it to finals. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that in most worlds, I'm not seeing it. So I think that BLG, the expectation should be that they make it to semis, but probably not finals. They could make it to finals, but they probably won't get there. All right, next up, must make quarters. So this tier is going to be really big. So the first team that I think must make quarters is AL. Some people might think that AL needs to make semis, but AL has not looked the same. They're not the same team that they were at MSI. ever since Shanks got into his big controversies, ever since it was revealed that Shanks is actually just like a terrible human being, AL has not looked the same. Shanks has not looked in form. Kyle has not looked in form. Flandre and Tarzan are still great. I still think that Tarzan is world class. I still think that Flandre is world class. I think that Hope is still playing well. I think that he is world class on certain champions, and then he is just good on other champions. So for me, it's like if this team is going to be a team that makes finals, Shanks and Kyle have to play the same way that they did in Split 2 and in Split 2 playoffs. And I just don't see that world for them because both of their forms have dipped. Like right now, AL's a team who is lacking the firepower to carry because before you would have Tarzan, Shanks, and Hope who could all shoulder a carry burden. But nowadays, Kyle's not playing as well, so it's harder for Hope to play. Shanks is not capable of putting the team on his back and carrying anymore. So this team, and Flandre is a facilitator first. He likes to support his team. So when you're looking at this team, it kind of just feels like Tarzan has to do everything. And then in the games where Hope can survive when Kyle's not playing that badly, then maybe Hope can join Tarzan and the two of them can try to 2v5 the enemy team. But it's just, AL is not a team that inspires a lot of confidence in me anymore. I feel like their ceiling has drastically dipped. So my expectation for them is that they don't make semis. I would be pretty surprised if they make semis. So I have them at the very top of must-make quarters. Another team who I think is coming in with the expectation that they must make quarters is G2. I think that G2, every single year, they come in with aspirations to do well internationally. In 2023 and 2024, even with the power of hindsight, we know that G2 didn't make it out of Swiss those years, but even with the power of hindsight, I think that G2 was the best Western team in both 2023 and 2024. So when they failed to make it out of Swiss in both of those years, in 23 when they didn't make it over NRG, and then in 2024 when they didn't make it over FlyQuest, the team, they decided to throw away everything and make big sweeping changes and change out parts of their roster because they were chasing for titles. Like G2 is not a team who wants to spend a year developing people. They're a team who wants to maybe spend a split developing people, but then they want to hit the ground running and actually look for good performances internationally. And Split 3, I think they finally got there. Split 3, this team looked really good. Their new pieces, Skewmond and Lebrov, finally started playing more active. They started being more involved. Their synergy together started clicking more. I think Caps is playing with really good form. I think Broken Blade, even in Split 3, has been playing with really good form recently, even though he was not so great in Split 2. I think in Split 3 he's been great. And we kind of saw all of this come together and lead to a storm where G2 basically just stomped their way through LEC playoffs. They 3-0'd MKOI in finals. They looked super clean while they were doing it. I was very impressed with that series. So when I see the trajectory that G2 is on, even though they looked really bad at MSI, when I see the Split 3 trajectory that they went on and just knowing how G2 views these internationals, I do feel like G2 needs to make quarters. And if they don't make quarters with the Split 3 performance they had, then they should view the year as a whole as a disappointment. They should view it as like, we weren't able to actually get any better than the last 2 years where we failed to make it out of Swiss. So I think G2 coming in with the expectations that they have to make quarters. Another team that I think has to make quarters, KT. If KT don't make quarters, there is something like they are going to be disappointed with themselves because they have some really, really strong players on that team. Like you have players like BDD and Cuz. If these players end up bowing out in Swiss to a Western team, they will feel disappointed with themselves. I think overall, like I've been wrestling a lot with, and actually I don't even know why I put KT here because I don't think that KT is the next strongest team, which I'll get into later. I think that KT will be the first team out of quarterfinals actually, which you'll see on my pick'ems. But either way, we can just talk about KT anyway. I wrestle back and forth with whether I think KT will be one of the top 8 teams. Because at the end of the day, like BDD is just at a level as a player that a lot of the other teams in this category are not at. I mean, like obviously Tarzan is a player who's at that level, but AL, I have them at the top of must-make quarters for a reason. It's because I think that they absolutely should lock quarters, whereas all the teams behind them are teams that like I think like should make quarters, but there's going to be a bunch of them, and maybe they make it, maybe they don't. KT, they do have some factors holding them back. I think that Perfect is not a great player. Peter is not a great player. Doc Dom is only a great player situationally, so KT are going to have some weak spots to work with, but at the end of the day, if a team with Cuz, Doc Dom, and BDD can't get it across the finish line against against the LCP 1 seed, the LEC 1 seed, and the LTA 1 seed, I think that they as an org will be disappointed with themselves. But above KT, actually, I have FlyQuest. So I think that FlyQuest is another team that feels like they must make quarterfinals. FlyQuest made quarterfinals last year, and since then they have only improved. I think that all 5 players on the team have improved to some degree, and some players have improved a lot. So like Busio has improved a lot. I think Bwipo has improved a lot from last year to this year. He's a lot more consistent this year than he was last year. Inspired has improved. Inspired was already a fantastic jungler. He's just gotten better. I think that both Inspired and Busio are top 5 players within their role. So this is a team that has the pieces to make it to quarters. They are also a team who has had insane domestic success. So like they went to MSI, they took BLG to 5 games, they made it to the 5th, 6th place spot. Then they went back domestically and have not dropped a single series. So the expectation is that they still look the same strength or better than they did at MSI. That is the expectation for them. Personally, I don't actually think that they're better than MSI. I think that FlyQuest's strength of schedule has not been beneficial to them. I think that they haven't really been challenged. I have not seen improvement from them in Split 3, from Split 2 to Split 3, that I saw from a team like G2, for example. So for me, I mean, like the big question that a lot of people are asking is like, which team do you think is better, G2 or FlyQuest? G2 or FlyQuest? I think that the argument for FlyQuest is that they were better for the first half of the year, and then they are also a more consistent team, whereas G2 has kind of only really found their form recently. But then the argument for G2 was that the way that they played through LEC playoffs, it looked like they were kind of playing at a level that FlyQuest was not forced to play at. So we have seen G2's ceiling in Split 3 be higher than Fly's ceiling, but it's because Fly haven't really had a chance to show that off because, LTA had the stupid pick and play format, so Fly didn't really have the chance to be challenged in the way that maybe they would have wanted to. So heading into Worlds, I do actually rate G2 slightly higher than FlyQuest, but I would not be surprised if FlyQuest ended up being the better team. Anyways, my main skepticism over Fly is that this split, especially, it feels like they've become very, very passive. And whenever a team looks like that, I get very scared for them because teams like that tend to struggle against elite level teams, especially from the East. So, FlyQuest, they're a team who are willing to give over a couple of objectives. They're willing to go behind in some gold because they believe in their comp. They believe that they can find windows to punish mistakes that the enemy teams make later. So they did, like, for example, I mentioned this somewhere in one of the earlier videos. In game 1 against VKS, the first time that they met up, FlyQuest, they felt like they had a scaling advantage, so they gave over first Drake, they gave over first 3 Grubs, they gave over second Drake, they gave over Rift Herald, and they were at like a 2k gold deficit. And then we were headed towards a game state where the two teams were going to have to fight it out for the third dragon. And to me, that is not a situation that I can really feel comfortable for FlyQuest in against a better team. Because what ended up happening in that game was that VKS got impatient. They tried to go for an invade before the third dragon spawned, like next to the tier 2. They ended up like diving the tier 2 and stuff, and the fight went terrible, and FlyQuest ended up, picking up the pieces, and then they had the lead. And once FlyQuest have a lead, they are very good at not throwing it. If FlyQuest ever get leads, even against some of these Eastern teams, I think they will be able to hold on to their lead and come away with the win. We saw them do that when they played against BLG. We even saw that against AL in their series against AL prior to that. But my problem is that FlyQuest, they're not a team who will really go out of their way to come up with coordinated plans to get these leads. They're not a team like T1 or Top Esports who can fight for their leads early. They're not a team like Gen G who can generate leads out of thin air. They are a team who are comfortable being even or falling behind, and then they'll try to get their leads elsewhere by punishing mistakes. And it's just, if you go up against one of these teams that I have in the top 4 and you give over Grubs to Dragons, a Herald, and have a 2k gold deficit, like, you're just not going to win. And so I think that FlyQuest's ceiling is limited. And I would not be surprised when I watch a team like G2 and I see the way that G2's jungle and support are working together, and I see the way that G2's solo laners are in form. I would not be surprised if G2 and Fly match up and G2 get ahead early and then Fly doesn't have a way back into the game. I could see that world. So that's just kind of where I'm at. If FlyQuest end up not making quarters, it will be because they are too passive, is my belief. But for the most part, I think that Fly's style is very consistent. They are not the type of team to throw leads. They are not the type of team to ever drop games to teams that are worse than them. So Fly for me is like a team that will definitely be somewhere within the, 6th to 10th place range. That's kind of where I view Fly. Okay, another team that I think must make quarterfinals is CFO. So I think that CFO, they are also they also placed 5th, 6th in MSI. They came out, they beat MKOI pretty convincingly. So the expectation for the LCP is that CFO should probably come in and be better than at least the LEC, because that's just what we saw. So, and then of course CFO, they went back domestically and they did not drop a single series to any team. In fact, CFO have only dropped a singular domestic series this entire year, and it was all the way back on February 8th when they lost the best of 3 to Secret Whales. So it hasn't been since the beginning of February that this team has dropped a domestic series. So in terms of how their form looks, they should be expected to be equal or better than they were at MSI. Now, the reason why I have CFO at the back of my must-make quarters list is because after watching CFO for the entire split, I had a few concerns. I always have my concerns with Kaiwing at an international. I'm not a big fan of Kaiwing's champion pool. I don't think that Kaiwing's engages and flanks translate that well against elite teams. Recently, I've also been having a problem with the fights that CFO choose to take. So there are a lot of games where CFO will go for objective fights that I don't actually think are good. They have kind of regressed into an AL form almost, where they will just show up to every single objective no matter what and fight it. The thing that makes AL better at this than CFO is that AL will always properly set up the objective at least. They'll show up to an objective that they have no business showing up to, but then they'll properly set it up and give them the best chance possible of winning the fight. CFO doesn't even do that. CFO will show up to every objective with a subpar setup and try to fight it anyway. And most of the time what happens is that they end up out-team fighting the team that they're playing against. They just end up hands diffing them because CFO is a very good team fighting team. But it doesn't change the fact that there are a lot of fights that CFO waltz into that I think that they should not be favored in. And I think if CFO tries to play one of those fights against one of the LPL or LCK teams, they will regret it. They'll end up falling super far behind in those games. We saw it happen in Game 1 versus PSG. There was a game where Driver was pushing top with Sion. He was going for plates. PSG were set up on the Dragon. CFO literally just walked in. They literally just walked in 4v5 because the enemy top laner had teleport. So they walked in 4v5, no setup, no vision, no nothing, and just tried to fight the Dragon, and they lost the fight because, obviously you're going to lose the fight in that situation. And PSG actually did end up winning that game. We've also seen CFO throw at Void Grubs at multiple games. We've seen them walk into a Void Grubs fight and then just lose the fight because it's not a timer they should be fighting on. Maybe enemy support has a level advantage, or they just have setup, or maybe they're just running an early game comp with Wukong Annie, and so it's a type of comp that CFO should never be fighting into. But then they'll just fight it anyway, and they'll lose the fight, and they have to come back into the game later by out-team fighting. We saw in Game 1 against Secret Whales in Grand Finals, Secret Whales were in a much more favorable position heading into the Rift Herald fight and heading into the Dragon fight after the Rift Herald. But in both of those fights, CFO showed up and fought it anyway, even though they probably shouldn't have. And then luckily somebody on Secret Whales made a mistake, and CFO were able to win those team fights, and they ended up winning that game. But it's not a playstyle to me that gives me much confidence when they go up and play against cleaner teams, when they go up against any of the teams above them. So I think that CFO, they placed 5th, 6th at MSI. They've had really good showings at first stand in MSI, and they have continued to defeat everybody domestically. So the expectation for CFO is that CFO should be expected to make quarters. But that said, me personally, I don't think that CFO has a good matchup into a lot of these teams above them. So I do not have them making quarters. But that'll wrap it up for the teams that I think should make quarters. Next up, we have the happy if wins 2 games territory. Oh, and I guess I should also add, in the world where IG beats T1, I don't think it's going to happen, but in the world where IG beats T1, I think the expectation for IG is that they make quarters, and I would put them, I'll put them here. I think the IG are a very smart team. They're a team who makes a lot of good plays. They're a team that has very good lane rotations and very good objective setups. So I think that baseline, their macro game is strong enough that they can beat a lot of these other teams in this tier. They could also lose to a lot of these teams in this tier, but I think that overall, they've got big enough brains that if they manage to beat T1 somehow, I would expect them to make quarters and then not get much further than that. So that is where I would put IG. I do think a series against IG versus KT would be very interesting. I'm kind of sad that T1 is the 4th seed. If KT was the 4th seed, I think that the play-in would be an absolute banger. Unfortunately, I do think T1 will just kind of they'll either 3-0 IG, or it will be like the most depressing 3-1 you've ever seen in your life. Like I do think T1 is just going to win that. So, but yeah, I would put IG in quarters. Happy if wins 2 games. Okay, I think that Koi would be happy if they won 2 games. I do not think that Koi should have the expectation to make quarters. We saw that they were definitely not the type of team G2 was. I don't think that there is a I don't think there's much chance that they're a better team than Fly either. I don't think that they should be expected to beat teams like IGKT, especially not AL, and we did see them also lose to CFO. So for Koi, if they bow out in Swiss, I would not be disappointed with their year. I would think that that would be about their expected result. MKOI's biggest strength for me has been their early games. I think that they are a pretty good early game team. It feels like when Elyoya is playing at his best, he is just making stuff happen early, and every single play he goes for turns to gold. We even saw this in Split 2 playoffs. It felt like against Fnatic and G2 that Elyoya would just go for like 2 or 3 pre-10-minute ganks every game, and then most of them would just work out, and MKOI would just have these leads every game. So if MKOI are playing at their best, I think they can generate leads against a good number of these teams. I don't know. I'm not confident that they can hold on to these leads. I'm not even confident that they can generate leads in the first place against some of the teams above them. But if they're playing at their best, if they do somehow find a way to make it to quarters, it will have to be because they're getting ahead early, and then Elyoya is in form, and then the carries can do their thing later without being behind. Next up, in happy if wins 2 games territory, I'm going to put Secret Whales. I do think that Secret Whales is a better team than people think they are. Secret Whales did get 3-0'd by CFO in Grand Finals, but again, I do think that series was closer than the scoreline would indicate. Secret Whales are a team who have, I mean, like their ceiling is the stars. I think that this team, if they're all clicking, they're an extremely mechanically talented team. When they're running the roster that has Hero, Hizto, Dyer, Eddie Taki, those are 5 players with tremendous ceilings who, if they're all clicking, if they're all in form, do have the potential to beat a team like CFO. Unfortunately, I kind of think that Secret Whales are in the same boat as HLE, where they are never all in form together. There's always at least 1 or 2 players who are having a bad game or just a bad day or something like that. So I don't think that Secret Whales are consistent enough yet to pull it together. I think that they should be happy if they win 2 games, and they should not be expected to make quarters. But that said, I think that Secret Whales, they are the type of team where if they manage to pull it together, they could take games off of pretty much any of these teams in the tier above them. I really think that they could win a best of 1 against any of these teams, and that Secret Whales should be a team that you should be scared of if you're one of these other regions as a potential spoiler. So yeah, not really much to say there. Secret Whales, they're just a super aggressive and fun team. And they will jump out to leads. They'll make a bunch of plays early, and you'll be really scared that you're going to lose to them. And then Secret Whales will just have some kind of mid-late game tragedy where they'll throw it all away, and then you'll come away from that game and you'll be like, "Whew, thank God we won." But man, that was scary. Like that's the type of team Secret Whales is. They remind me a lot of like old OMG. That's kind of the comparison I've given Secret Whales. They are my favorite team heading into the tournament. I do not expect them to make it to quarters or anything. I think they should be happy if they win 2 games. Next up in the happy if win 2 games, I'm going to put Fnatic in there. I think that normally I would end up putting Fnatic kind of in this lower tier, but Fnatic to me, they really showed me something in playoffs. They did end up losing to MKOI, but in their series, both against KC and in their next match against MKOI, even though they lost, this Fnatic team looked to me like a completely different team than I've seen them look in the past, multiple years, really. I thought that they were much more tempered. They were much more controlled. They were still able to jump out to the leads that they can jump out to sometimes. Because, Razor, he's a very good early game player. Mickey is also just a very good player at making things happen, at getting his team advantages. In the past, Fnatic would then be completely lost in mid and late game. They would throw their leads, things would look terrible. Ever since they brought Poby in, it feels like the team has more direction. They no longer feel like they are rushed to generate these infinite gold leads. I don't think Fnatic are as throw prone as they used to be. So I do think Fnatic is stable enough now that they can definitely get a win or 2 on the board. I would not be surprised if they ended up making it to that 2-win day. I do not think they can make it to quarterfinals. I would be shocked if they made it to quarterfinals, but I do have slightly higher expectations of them than in past tournaments. The sentiment that I kind of echoed for Fnatic is that in past Worlds, they've been knocked out in like the 9th to 12th place range. I think that in past years, that was their ceiling, so they would come in, and that is the best they could possibly do. This year, I also think they will get knocked out in that same range, but this time it'll look more like their floor, and then they can go into 2026 with more of a direction. They can go into 2026 looking to grow and improve as long as they can keep that core of players together. I think I'll actually be pretty upset if Poby ends up leaving, because I do think that Poby added a lot to this team just with his playstyle and kind of what he brings thematically to the squad. Then everybody else in this tier I have in the happy if wins one game tier. So the next team that I'm going to put up is 100 Thieves. I know that people from VKS will say that they think that they're a better team than 100 Thieves because they looked a lot better than 100 Thieves on the day. But, you know, there's a lot of things about VKS that we have to be worried about. Like these players don't have international success. Like apart from Miru, they don't really have international success, and Miru has never really made it further than the play-ins, I don't think. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that I've heard that VKS have been having disaster flight schedules. They've been having flight delays. They've been having visa issues. So they're coming into this tournament like super, super late. They're going to have no scrim time. They're barely going to be able to recover from jet lag. So it's just like all of this stuff. It's like when I put VKS behind 100 Thieves, part of it is because I think that 100 Thieves just underperformed a lot in that series. But another part of it is definitely that I think that there were a lot of things outside of VKS's control that are hurting them at this Worlds. And it's not VKS's fault. It's just that the cards that they were dealt in real life were just unfortunate. And so it's kind of sad that that's how it turned out. 100 Thieves, you know, I think if they're playing at their best, like River is a pretty strong jungler. Quid has like MVP caliber ceiling. We saw Quid underperform drastically last World, so you know we don't know. Maybe Quid will just like completely choke. But I think that this team does have the types of players on it where they can come away with one win. Same thing for VKS. You know, I'll put VKS next. I think that VKS can win a game for sure. I think I would be surprised if they win 2 games, but there are definitely a lot of teams here that they could beat. I think that VKS can potentially beat 100 Thieves. They can potentially beat Fnatic and Secret Whales. And I think honestly they should be favored to beat PSG. Like I'll put PSG down like behind VKS for sure. Like I think there are plenty of teams that VKS can beat. Like I know that that I put VKS behind 100 Thieves here, and I know that if you watched my player rankings, I ended up putting VKS players behind 100 Thieves players in a lot of the tier lists. But I do think that VKS as a team have a higher ceiling than 100 Thieves. Like I would be very surprised if either 100 Thieves or VKS win 2 games. But at the end of the day, I would be less surprised if VKS did it, because the one thing that VKS has that 100 Thieves don't really have is that it feels like 100 Thieves kind of topped out a bit. Like the way that they were playing in split 3 playoffs, I don't think that they get much better than that. But VKS, they continue to level up their game over the course of cross conference. So I really think that this team can be a lot better in the future. So if this team ends up taking another step forward at Worlds, and then they end up, you know, getting a good draw and then getting 2 wins, I would not be as surprised as I would be to see 100 Thieves get 2 wins. You know what? I think I'm psyoping myself a little bit. I'm actually going to put VKS above 100 Thieves. Screw the flight plans and the visas or whatever. At the end of the day, like VKS did beat 100 Thieves, and like, yeah, 100 Thieves underperformed, blah, 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 whatever. But it's also like 100 Thieves, these players underperformed at past internationals, so we don't have anything to go off of to say that they'll look better. VKS is a team whose trajectory I liked a lot. I thought that in grand finals against Fly, the one game that they won was pretty impressive. I think that they've definitely leveled up a lot. I think that they have some super promising players on their team. Like Desamis and Morteus are players that I think are very interesting. And then the other thing that I'll say is that I think that VKS I think that they play as a unit. Like I said this in the VKS team breakdown, that I thought that their players were a little bit green, and I might have them lower on my player rankings, but that together as a unit, they grow and improve their team game a lot. So I think that they are one of those teams who are more than the sum of their parts. So yeah, I think I'm going to put VKS above 100 Thieves. And then I'm going to have both teams above PSG. I think that PSG are really like barely scraping their way into this tournament. The main reason that they're here to me is because GAM, as soon as playoffs hit, GAM just felt like a completely different team. I don't know what happened to them. GAM used to be really proactive. They would get leads early and then they would be fearless in mid-game. But it felt like as soon as playoffs hit, GAM just stopped doing anything. Like they just became like a stone statue. They would just do nothing and lose is what GAM kind of turned into. So, when PSG beat GAM, I was not that confident that PSG were going to be a strong team, and then they ended up dropping down to third seed. So I think that kind of lines up. PSG have a lot of problems as a team. They are the opposite of VKS. PSG are worse than the sum of their parts. So they have five solid players, like five players who do deserve to be at a Worlds, but the problem is that all five of their players are role players. None of them are players who will step up and carry a game. And then so when PSG lose, they lose in kind of these like depressing, underwhelming ways. They're not even a team who's consistent enough to hold on to a lead. They threw a 13k gold lead against CFO. Like they had a 13k gold lead, and then they just played their comp out horribly. Like they had a poke comp with, I believe it was like Varus and Nidalee or something. But then they kept on trying to set up these front-to-back team fights. Like, they weren't actually poking at all. Like, they had objective setup, and instead of using their setup to give the space slowly and poke, they would just, like, go in. They would just engage and then lose the fight. And they did that multiple times, and they ended up losing that game. It was crazy to watch. So I don't really have any faith in PSG to play well at this tournament. I think that ever since Fofo left, they kind of lost their identity a lot. They don't really have a carry. Like, Karsa's been trying. Karsa's tried to handle some more of the resources, but we've seen that have varying levels of success. I think that PSG are the team most likely at this tournament to go 0-3. So there you go. That's my tier list. I ended up rambling on this tier list longer than I thought I would. Let's get to the pick'ems. So this is probably the one that you all want to see. This is what I have in my Swiss stage. Again, no matter how much I think top esports are chokers, and no matter how much I have zero faith in them internationally, when push comes to shove, if I only think about the game based on like what I actually saw, what I think these teams are capable of, if I completely ignore my heart and I just go with like what my brain and my eyes saw, I do think the top esports should be expected to kind of go 3-0. I also have Gen G T1 here. I mean, this lines up pretty closely with this, to be honest. Like, I think the Swiss stage is a little bit luck because like one of these teams are going to end up with a shitty draw, and other of these teams are just going to end up with really lucky draws. We saw in past years, there was a year where KT had to play 5 Eastern teams in Swiss, and that same year, NRG did not need to beat a single Eastern team to make it to quarters. Like, NRG beat 3 Western teams, and KT had to slugfest their way through 5 Eastern teams. And so, like, sometimes Swiss can just do that, so I would be shocked if it ends up going like this. Like, surely one of these teams will get a lucky draw and one of them will get an unlucky draw, but overall, I have Gen G T1 Top Esports 3-0, BLG, HLE, AL 3-1, and then in my 3-2 category, I have G2 and Fly. So the teams that I have not making it are KT and CFO. I think those are the 2 teams who out of that bunch of 4 teams who I think can slip into quarters, these are the 2 that I picked. Moving into Crystal Ball, champions. Which champion will be picked the most? I went with Talia. So when I was looking at the champions who are like super high prio to split, what I was looking at were the top laners are like Rumble and Bessa are kind of the 2 ones that were the kings. Gwen was also up there, but then Gwen got nerfed a couple of times, and it got to the point where it's kind of just Rumble and Bessa. For junglers, it was Kiana, Pantheon, Wukong. Mid laners were Azir, Talia, and then some Orianna. Bot laners were all over the place. Like, we saw some Yunara prio. There were times where Varus had prio, but then Varus got nerfed. Then it kind of became like a Sivir Corki meta, but both Sivir and Corki got nerfed. Then it kind of became Kai'Sa, but recently we've been seeing teams like be more willing to pick stuff like Karma and Bard, and we've seen like a Tristana counterpick, so I feel like Kai'Sa's prio will go down. And then for supports, like it feels like none of the engaged supports are that much better than the other ones. Like, in my opinion, I think that Braum is pretty strong. I think Alistar is pretty strong. I think Rel is strong. And then I think that Nico is super strong as well. But we haven't really seen any of those picks be like super game 1 prio or anything. So for me, kind of how it felt was like, I don't think it's going to be a support. I think the supports are pretty evenly balanced. I think that bot lane is completely up in the air. We don't know what's going to be the highest prio bot laner. It feels like there are a bunch of bot laners who are all like pretty good, but none of them are amazing. Then we get to mid lane, and Azir was nerfed a couple of times. And then also Azir seems to be a champion that a lot of teams like to ban. So, we also saw some other mid laners getting nerfed. So I think that Talia wasn't touched. So I think she's going to rise up and kind of be the champion that teams want to pick every series. So that's why I have her there. Also, junglers, Pantheon got nerfed, Kiana got nerfed, Wukong got nerfed. So the 3 junglers that were kind of at the top there are all taking a step back. So I don't know what the super high prio jungler is going to be. And then for top laners, it's like, yeah, you have Rumble and Ambessa, but I don't really think that that either of those champions were prioritized the same way that mid laners and junglers were this split. So yeah, I have Talia picked the most. Azir, I have banned the most. I coin flipped between this and another champion who I'll talk about later. But at the end of the day, even though Azir got hit with nerfs twice, he got hit with two nerfs. I still think he'll be banned a lot because there are a lot of teams at this tournament who have notable Azirs, and I think that for the most part, teams just end up fearing Azir. Azir becomes a champion that a lot of teams get scared of playing against. So even if Azir is on the weaker side, I do feel like it's going to end up at some point pushing its way back into the meta, and then as soon as it does, every team is just going to start permabanning it because they're just not going to want to play against it. That's kind of what I decided, even though Azir got nerfed. There is a chance that Azir got nerfed hard enough that he will just completely drop in prio, and the most banned champion will be something else. Maybe it'll be Talia, maybe it'll be, Orianna or something. But I went with Azir. Jace, which champion will have the highest win rate? I went with Jace. So the reason why I went with Jace is because I think that a lot of the bad teams know that they cannot play Jace. I think that a lot of the Western teams, a lot of the lower tier Eastern teams, any top laner who is not confident in their skills tend to stay away from Jace. I think for the most part, the only people who pick Jace are the ones who are confident that they can stomp lane. So I think that we will be in my opinion, Jace seems like the type of top laner where only the top teams will pick him, and then he'll be able to stomp and then generate a lot of wins. The ways in which this could be sabotaged, I think there's a chance that the Shy picks against T1. That would not be a good start for the Jace. I think there is a chance that Hero O2 tries to pick the Jace at some point, and then maybe he loses. So there are some players at this tournament who are willing to pick Jace, even if they're not favored to win their match. But for the most part, I think that, the Jace players will be sticking to players like Keen, Zeus, Bin, players who will come in as favorites and they'll pick Jace and then they'll win the game. So that's why I have Jace there. Which champion do I think will have the lowest win rate? I went with LeBlanc. So this was the other champion who I coin flipped putting on most banned. I think that there's a chance that LeBlanc is just permabanned at this tournament because the LeBlanc buffs. Okay, so here's my opinion. I think that LeBlanc is a very strong champion coming into this world. I think that she is a very good mid laner. However, I think she is also a very difficult mid laner to play. So when it comes to champions having the lowest win rate, I feel like it's hard to get this one right. So the logic that I went with is that I feel like LeBlanc will have a similar showing at Worlds that Twisted Fate and Callista did at MSI, where she's going to come in, teams are going to see her buffs. She has really big buffs, and she feels very strong. So I think that teams will misconstrue that into thinking that she is a higher prio champion than she is, and they'll try to force her in a lot of games that she won't be good in. So what I'm kind of hoping for when I make this pick is that LeBlanc will be picked a bunch at the start of the tournament in game one when people shouldn't be picking her. They'll try to blind her and then they'll lose. So she'll rack up a bunch of losses and then people will just stop playing her. Even if she's good, they'll just stop playing her. That's kind of what I envision when I have this here. Well, I mean, what my heart really wants is that I would love to see LeBlanc be a high prio champion. I think that LeBlanc is super fun to watch. She's a super exciting champion. So I would love to see her be played a lot. But yeah, just because I can envision the scenario in which she just loses 10 games in a row and never gets picked again, I decided to put her here. Which champion will have the most kills? I went with Kai'Sa. I keep on saying that I think that Kai'Sa prio should drop, but there's also a lot of good Kai'Sa players at this tournament. And so I feel like Kai'Sa prio will not drop. And every single time that Kai'Sa gets picked, it feels like because she has a lot of agency, she ends up racking up 9, 10, 11 kills in the games that she's in. So I put her up there. Moving on to players, which pro will have the highest KDA? I went with Viper. The reason why I went with Viper is because I feel like Viper is so first of all, I wanted to go for a team who I think will win a lot of games, a team who will go into almost every game as the favorite. And then I also wanted to go with a player who I felt would be very consistent and doesn't int very much, so I went with Viper. I think that for this category, you almost always go with a bot laner, and the other bot laners I'm not amazingly confident in. I think that Ruler and Jackie Love will get caught out on some mid waves. I think that Elk will be psychotic and go in and die sometimes. So I decided to go with Viper because I think he was the most consistent bot laner, and I think he's on a good team. Which pro will play the most different champions? I went with Knight because that is what we've seen. Knight plays a ridiculous amount of champions. I think he had something it was 11 champions in 14 games or something crazy like that. Or 12 champions in 14 games or something like that in playoffs. He's always looking to play a bunch of different stuff. So I had Knight here. Which pro will get at least one pentakill? I understand that Gen G are a team who are not afraid of stealing pentas. So like if we're looking at teams who are willing to give over pentas, like we're looking at FlyQuest. So FlyQuest is the type of team where if somebody is in position to get a pentakill, then the team will do everything they can to give over the pentakill. So I think if you could put somebody like Masu here, that would make sense. Even though Gen G steals a lot of pentas, the reason why I put Ruler here is because one, I think that the most likely role to get a pentakill is bot lane. And two, I think that Gen G will have a really deep run at the tournament, so they will have more chances to get pentakills. Like I think that Ruler will be the bot laner who has the most opportunities to get a penta, even if the team like tries to steal most of them. I think he'll have the most opportunities, so I put Ruler here anyway. Which pro will get the most first bloods? In past years, I feel like I see this one end up going to bot laners most of the time, so I decided to just go with the most aggressive bot laner I could think of, so I went with Elk. Which pro will get the most kills in a single game? Again, I think you have to give this one to a marksman. And I think, and my logic was that I wanted to give it to the one who I thought would get the deepest in the tournament. So the player who will have the most opportunities to rack up a lot of kills. So I went with the Ruler. Teams, which team will kill the most Elder Dragons? Which team will have the most Baron steals? I went with T1 because T1 always have some black magic fuckery where they like just steal a bunch of objectives and get their way back into games. So this is like entirely just based on like the heebie-jeebies. I just put these there. So yeah. I don't think anybody can blame me for this. Which team will win the shortest game duration? I went with AL because AL are a team who like to fight everything. So I think that in this Worlds, or like in this current format, the way that we see games end the fastest are when two teams are posturing for a soul fight and one team aces the other team at the soul fight and that ends the game. I think those are the fastest games that we've seen. And when I think about teams that might do that, I think AL, because AL are a team who show up to every objective and fight to the death. So I could totally see a world where AL show up to a soul dragon fight, regardless of whether they're ahead or behind, that they just show up to a soul fight, ace the enemy team, end the game. I could see that, so I put AL here. Which team will get the most kills? I went with Gen G. I didn't know what this question was asking. I don't know if they were asking which team will get the most kills in a single game or which team will get the most kills over the course of the tournament. So I went Gen G just in case it was most kills over the course of the tournament because, again, I want to go for a team that's going to make a deep run. And then again, even if it is individual game, I still want to go with Gen G because even though people perceive them as a slow team, I don't think that Gen G are a slow team. I think that, I mean, they're a slow early game team, but I think that once you get into mid game, they're not a slow team, and it's just that other teams get scared to kind of play up to their level. But, you know, Gen G will have a lot of opportunities to play against LPL teams, and LPL teams will not shy away. Like, LPL teams will gladly walk up to the objective and get aced. So, yeah, I think that Gen G can have some super high kill games at this tournament, and I think that if this question is asking about over the course of the entire tournament, Gen G's a safe bet because I think they'll have a deep run. Same thing for this, which team will play the most unique champion pool, most champions. Like, so I went with Gen G because I think that they are a very flexible, fearless team. Like in Fearless Draft, games 4 and 5, they always have some crazy picks they can bring out. And again, because I think they're going to make a deep run at the tournament, so I wanted to put down a team that I think will make a deep run. Like, I think that in this spot, you could also put a team, like, for example, you could put G2. But my problem with G2 is that there's a chance they don't even make it to quarterfinals, or that they do make it to quarterfinals and get shut out pretty fast. So I don't want to put a team like that here, so I decided to go with Gen G. And lastly, we have events. So how many pentakills would there be? I went with 3+. Pentakills, it feels like it's only ever 0 or 3+. We've had some events where we hit 3 pentakills in play-in stage, and we've had some events where we've never gotten a pentakill. For me, I feel like it's more fun to kind of like watch and wait for the 3 pentakills to happen. So I went with 3+ just because it's like the most entertaining for me. How many Baron steals would there be? I went with 6 to 8. The other option is like 9+, but I picked that a couple of times with the same mindset as the pentakill one. But the pentakill 3+ sometimes hits, and the Baron Steel 9+ like never hits ever, so I decided to not go with that. How many reverse sweeps will there be? I said 0, just because reverse sweeps tend to be pretty improbable, and there are only 7. There are only 7 best of 5s, which is a very low number. This is not MSI where we have, 19 best of 5s or whatever. All we get is single elimination quarterfinal knockouts, so I decided to go with 0. How many unique champions will be picked? I went with 0 to 99 because I went back and I looked at LPL and LCK, which are the 2 regions who played the most amount of games, and both of those regions were under 99. They were like high 80s, low 90s for unique champions picked. So like if those regions aren't reaching 100 champions in like the like hundreds and hundreds of games that they played, I don't think we're reaching 100 champions at Worlds. And then we'll team will be picked now because unfortunately my goat ADD is not at this tournament, so we don't have somebody who will counter pick themselves with Teemo. So yeah, those are my pick'ems. These are my Swiss stage draws, and this is my tier list. So that's all I have for you for this one. The only other video I have pre-Worlds is going to be the draft video. I'll work on that later today. My plan is to get that one out at noon. That's going to be where I go over patch 25.18, 19, and 20, and then I'll like make a little tier list for what I think champion prios might look like at the tournament, and like I'll talk about some of the common combos that we see and stuff. So yeah, expect that video. I think at this point I'll have time to do it. And then, of course, once World starts, I'll be doing my daily recaps the same way that I did for MSI. So you can tune in for those. Those daily recap videos will also include my predictions for the next day. So if you're somebody who's interested in seeing what my predictions are going to be, then that's where they'll be, is in those daily recaps. Patreon shoutouts. I have a Patreon. Go check out the link in the description if you want to support me more. We have a lot of bonus content on there. So I have all of my video scripts go up there before I post them. I'm probably not going to post my video scripts for the recaps. That seems a little bit redundant because I write the script and I post the video like 2-3 hours later, so probably not going to see those. But for the most part, if I write a script, that goes up there before the video gets posted, so it's kind of like a sneak peek. If you subscribe to the $10 tier, I'll draw you a custom Poro. You can see some of those on the screen. I will also record the session, the drawing session, and then I'll post the unedited drawing session to the Patreon, so that'll be up there too. I also have a rewatch of the Worlds 2022 Grand Finals between DRX and T1. I recently rewatched that. That's like a 5-hour video. That's up there. That'll turn into a YouTube video eventually, but until then, there's a sneak peek on there for that. So if any of that interests you, go check out the Patreon. And that's all I have for you for this one. I'll see you all for the next one. Bye.